My name is Margaret. I'm 67 years old, and I never imagined my daughter-in-law would try to erase me from my son's life after his death. I still remember the morning the phone rang, the sound that shattered my world. It was a police officer's voice, calm but heavy, asking if I was Daniel Brooks's mother. My heart froze. Daniel, my only son, my pride, my joy, had been in a car accident. By the time I reached the hospital, it was too late. They said he died instantly. I stood there numb, my fingers gripping the cold steel rail of the hospital bed, staring at a face that once smiled brighter than the sun. Daniel was just 38, brilliant and kind. He built a tech company from nothing and made a fortune, but no amount of money could fill the silence that followed his death. He left behind Vanessa, his wife of 8 years, and their little boy Lucas, who was only 8. When Daniel married Vanessa, I tried to welcome her with open arms. She was beautiful, confident, and ambitious. But there was something about her smile that never reached her eyes. At first, I thought it was just nerves or insecurity. But over the years, I saw the truth. Vanessa liked control. She decided where they lived, who they saw, and even how often I could visit. Daniel always tried to keep the peace, telling me, "Mom, she just wants space." But space became distance, and soon, I barely saw my son except on birthdays or holidays. Still, I loved him fiercely and never wanted to drive a wedge between us. After Daniel's death, Vanessa changed from cold to cruel. She refused to let me see Lucas, claiming he was too distraught. I understood grief. I'd lost my husband years earlier, but Vanessa's cruelty went beyond mourning. She ignored my calls, returned my letters unopened, and even told mutual friends that I was trying to claim what wasn't mine. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a letter from a law firm. Daniel's will was to be read, and I was listed as a beneficiary. I almost didn't go. What could money possibly mean now? But part of me wanted closure, maybe even a last connection to my son. When I arrived at the lawyer's office, Vanessa was already there, wearing a sleek black dress and sunglasses, though it was cloudy outside. She didn't look like a grieving widow. She looked like someone preparing for victory. The lawyer, Mr. Fletcher, greeted me kindly and asked us both to sit. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. Vanessa crossed her legs and leaned back, smirking. "I think we all know how this will go," she said. Her voice dripped with arrogance. I didn't reply. I just held my small purse in my lap, clutching a handkerchief I'd used at Daniel's funeral. Mr. Fletcher opened the folder in front of him and began reading. "This is the last will and testament of Daniel Brooks." His tone was steady, professional. He explained that Daniel's estate, worth $70 million, would be divided among specific beneficiaries. Vanessa tilted her chin up, smiling as if she already knew her part. My heart pounded as I waited for my son's words to reveal themselves through the lawyer's voice. I didn't care about money, I just wanted to hear that he remembered me, that he loved me. But before the reading could continue, Vanessa turned to me, her voice sharp and venomous. "You'll get nothing from your son's $70 million, she hissed, her lips curling into a cruel grin. Mr. Fletcher looked up sharply, frowning. I sat frozen, her words echoing in my ears like gunshots. The room felt colder, smaller. My son's death had already taken everything from me now. His wife wanted to take whatever pieces were left. Vanessa smirked across the table and whispered, "You'll get nothing from your son's $70 million. The lawyer's office fell silent as Vanessa's words echoed through my mind like a cruel verdict. I wanted to respond, to remind her that I was Daniel's mother, not some stranger trying to steal from her, but I bit my tongue. I could almost hear Daniel's voice in my head, telling me to stay calm. Mr. Fletcher, the lawyer, cleared his throat and gave Vanessa a disapproving look. "Mrs. Brooks, please allow me to continue. These are Daniel's final wishes, and they will be respected." Vanessa's smirk faltered for a moment, but she folded her arms and leaned back in the leather chair. I sat still, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, trying to steady my breathing. The sound of paper rustling filled the room as Mr. Fletcher began reading again. "Daniel Brooks, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." He spoke with deliberate clarity, outlining the value of Daniel's estate stocks, real estate, company shares, and a range of investments I barely understood. $70 million, that number didn't even sound real to me. I still thought of Daniel as the little boy who sold lemonade on the front lawn, not a man worth more money than I could ever imagine. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, adjusting her posture as if preparing for her moment of triumph. Her expression said everything. She believed every cent would be hers. Mr. Fletcher continued, the first beneficiary named in this will is Lucas Brooks, Daniel's son. A trust will be established in his name, to be released upon his 18th birthday. Vanessa smiled again. As his mother, I'll control that trust, she said smugly. But Mr. Fletcher shook his head. Actually, Mrs. Brooks, Daniel designated a separate trustee and independent financial officer. You will not have direct access to the funds. The color drained slightly from her face. I hid my reaction behind a calm expression, though inside, I felt a tiny spark of justice. Mr. Fletcher went on. The second allocation goes to various charitable organizations, Daniel. Supported children's education programs, medical research foundations, and community shelters. Vanessa let out a short, derisive laugh. He was too generous for his own good, she muttered under her breath. Then, Mr. Fletcher paused, adjusting his glasses. And finally, the remaining portion of the estate is to be divided as follows. He glanced briefly at me, his eyes kind but serious. $10 million shall be placed in a trust under the name of Margaret Brooks. The air was sucked out of the room. Vanessa's smile vanished completely. What? She barked, her voice echoing off the walls. That can't be right. Mr. Fletcher didn't flinch. It's written clearly in Daniel's own handwriting, and notarized. He left specific instructions that this portion be used to ensure his mother's comfort and well-being for the rest of her life. Vanessa shot up from her seat. This is absurd. She doesn't need that money. She's already got her house, she's old. What's she going to do with $10 million? I stayed silent, though my hands trembled slightly on my lap. Daniel had remembered me. Even after everything, even after the distance Vanessa had created between us, he still thought of me. Mr. Fletcher's tone remained composed but firm. Mrs. Brooks, if you wish to contest the will, you are within your rights to do so. But I assure you, all documentation is legally binding. Vanessa turned toward me, her face twisted in anger. You must have manipulated him. You turned him against me. I looked up at her calmly. Vanessa, I said softly. Daniel made his own choices. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her fury barely contained. This isn't over, she hissed, snatching her purse from the chair. As she stormed out of the office, Mr. Fletcher sighed, rubbing his temples. I'm sorry for her behavior, Mrs. Brooks. Your son clearly wanted to make sure you were cared for. I'll handle the trust arrangements personally. I nodded, still overwhelmed by the swirl of emotions, grief, relief, disbelief. My son had left me a final gift, one that said he still loved me, even if he hadn't had the chance to say it aloud. But deep down, I knew Vanessa wouldn't let it go. The lawyer announced Margaret would receive $10 million and Vanessa exploded in fury. You don't deserve a cent! Vanessa screamed, slamming her hands on the table. Her voice was so loud that it startled even Mr. Fletcher, who had been quietly organizing the papers. I sat still, refusing to let her see the shock spreading through me. I'd faced heartbreak, poverty, and loss before, but nothing quite like the hatred in her eyes at that moment. She was seething, like a storm trapped in human form. Mr. Fletcher stood, his tone calm but firm. Mrs. Brooks, please lower your voice. This is a legal office, not a battleground. Vanessa turned toward him sharply. Don't tell me what to do. My husband just died, and this woman, she pointed a trembling finger at me, is already cashing in on it. I wanted to tell her that no amount of money could replace my son. That the only thing I wanted was a piece of him to hold on to, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Vanessa wasn't speaking from grief, she was speaking from greed. Mr. Fletcher sighed, rubbing his forehead. Mrs. Brooks, I'm going to remind you that your husband's will is final. Daniel's instructions were clear. If you attempt to contest it without grounds, It will only waste time and resources. Vanessa laughed bitterly. You think I care about wasting money? That old woman will regret stealing from me. Vanessa, I said quietly, meeting her glare. Daniel made his decisions. None of this was my doing. I didn't even know about the will until today. Liar, she shouted, tears mixing with fury. You've always hated me. You turned Daniel against me for years. Her words cut deep, but I forced myself to stay composed. I never wanted to come between you two, I said softly. I only ever wanted my son to be happy. Mr. Fletcher stepped between us. Enough. If you cannot control yourself, I'll have to ask you to leave. Vanessa grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, but before leaving, she leaned close to me. I could feel the heat of her breath. You'll pay for this, she whispered. You and your precious inheritance. Then she slammed the door behind her. The silence that followed was heavy. Mr. Fletcher looked at me with genuine concern. She's unstable, he said quietly. If she threatens you again, you must call the authorities immediately. I nodded, still trying to absorb everything that had just happened. She's angry now, I murmured. But she'll calm down, she has to. Mr. Fletcher didn't look convinced. He handed me his card and added, I'll arrange for the funds to be placed in your trust account within the week. But please be careful. When I stepped outside, the sky was gray and heavy with rain. The air smelled like metal and sorrow. I stood on the steps of the law office, clutching my handbag to my chest, and felt a chill run through me. I didn't want any of this, not the money, not the anger, not the fear. I only wanted my son back. That night, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the framed photo of Daniel and me from years ago before he met Vanessa. His arm was around my shoulders, his smile wide and genuine. I whispered, Why did you have to go so soon? The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me. I reached for it, expecting maybe a message from Nora, my best friend. But the number was unknown. I hesitated before opening it. The message read, That money should have been mine. Watch your back. My stomach twisted. My fingers trembled as I reread the words. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I knew exactly who sent it. That money should have been mine. Watch your back. I never thought grief could turn into fear until the messages started coming every night. At first, I tried to convince myself that the message I'd received was just a one-time outburst. Maybe Vanessa sent it in the heat of anger, and she'd calm down once reality set in. But by the second night, another message arrived. You'll regret crossing me. The next? You won't enjoy that money for long. My heart would pound every time my phone vibrated after dark. I changed my number, thinking that would stop her. But 2 days later, the messages came again, this time to my landline. The voice on the other end didn't speak, only breathed heavily before hanging up. It was always late, just past midnight, when the world was quiet and my imagination was loud. I started keeping the lights on, too afraid to let the house fall into darkness. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart jump. I'd wake up at odd hours and check the locks twice, sometimes 3 times. My once peaceful home, the place where I raised Daniel, where I used to feel safe, now felt like a cage. When I finally told my friend Nora about it, she was furious. You can't let her do this to you, Margaret, she said firmly over coffee one morning. You need to go to the police. So I did. I showed the officer the messages, the timestamps, the call logs. He was polite but cautious. Without concrete proof she's the one sending these, we can't press charges, but we can make a report and keep it on file. It was something, but not enough to ease my fear. Vanessa was clever, she wouldn't leave a trace. A few days later, I noticed something strange. When I came home from grocery shopping, a black SUV was parked across the street. I didn't think much of it at first, it could have been a neighbor's guest. But then I saw it again the next night and the night after that. The same dark windows, the same stillness. One evening, I gathered the courage to step outside, pretending to take the trash out. The car's engine started immediately, and it drove off without headlights. My hands shook as I hurried back inside. That's when I realized this wasn't just intimidation, someone was watching me. Nora insisted I install security cameras. She helped me pick out a simple system and set it up around the house. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. But peace didn't last long. The next morning, when I reviewed the footage, my blood ran cold. At 2:17 a.m., the camera caught movement near my mailbox. A figure, dressed in dark clothes, hood pulled low, stood there for nearly a minute before walking off into the shadows. I couldn't see the face, but the height, the shape. It looked like a woman. I immediately called Mr. Fletcher and told him everything. He didn't hesitate. "I'll hire private security for you," he said. "We'll also contact a private investigator. If Vanessa is behind this, we'll find out." When the investigator came by, he advised me to document everything, every message, every sighting, every noise. It felt strange, turning my life into evidence, but I followed his instructions carefully. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued posting on social media smug photos with captions like, "People will do anything for money," or "Karma always finds its way." Each post felt like a dagger aimed at me. The tension built until one morning, when I woke to the sound of my screen door slamming against the house. I rushed downstairs, heart racing. The lock was broken, and the front door stood wide open. The cool morning air swept through my hallway. I froze, my eyes darting across the room, afraid of what I might find. One morning, Margaret wakes up to find her front door wide open. My hands trembled as I stepped over shattered glass, knowing someone had been inside my home. The living room was in chaos, drawers pulled open, papers scattered, and a lamp shattered on the floor. I stood there frozen, the morning light stretching across the mess like a cruel spotlight. Whoever had come in hadn't stolen much, not the TV, not the jewelry box on the dresser, but something was off. It felt personal, like someone had come to send a message. When the police arrived, 2 officers swept through the house while another took my statement. I told them everything, the messages, the car, the threats. One of the officers, a younger man with kind eyes, looked genuinely sympathetic. "Ma'am," he said, "it seems like intimidation. Whoever did this wanted to scare you." He was right, because when I walked into Daniel's old study, I saw the real target. Every photograph of Daniel had been ripped from the frames, the glass shattered and tossed on the floor. The memories of my son, the moments I cherished most, were scattered and trampled. I pressed a hand over my mouth to stop the sob that clawed its way up my throat. The police dusted for fingerprints but didn't find anything useful. "No signs of forced entry," one officer said. "The lock wasn't broken, maybe someone had a key." A key. My stomach twisted. Vanessa had a spare from years ago, back when Daniel was alive. She used to let herself in when they visited. She must still have it. When the police left, I sank onto the couch, staring at the empty picture frames on the wall. My grief was now mixed with dread. I called Nora, and she rushed over immediately. She gasped when she saw the mess. "This is insane," she said. "You need to stay somewhere else, she's clearly unhinged." I nodded reluctantly. Mr. Fletcher agreed when I called him next. "It's best if you leave for a few days," he said. "I'll have my investigator check the security footage and we'll change your locks." That night, I packed a small suitcase and went to stay with Nora. Her home was small but warm, filled with laughter and the comforting smell of cinnamon candles. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every car that drove by, every creak in the house made me flinch. A few days later, Mr. Fletcher called with an update. "Margaret," he said carefully, "we reviewed the footage. There was someone outside your house the night before the break-in, same figure near your mailbox, but still no clear face." I sighed, exhausted. "So we still don't know who it is." He hesitated before continuing. "Not yet. But our investigator found something interesting. There have been unusual withdrawals from one of Daniel's company accounts in the weeks leading up to his death." My chest tightened. "What kind of withdrawals?" "Large ones. And there's an account $5 million that was moved just before the accident. We're looking into where it went." That night, while I tried to rest, my mind replayed every memory of Daniel's last days. He'd seemed distracted during our final phone call, his voice tight when he said, "Mom, Things are complicated right now. But I promise, everything will make sense soon. At the time, I thought he was talking about work stress. Now, I wasn't so sure. 2 days later, I drove back home briefly to collect some papers. The air inside felt heavy, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. On the kitchen counter, beneath a pile of unopened mail, I found a single envelope, no return address. My name written in block letters. Inside was a single typed sentence: "Stop digging or you'll join him." The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. Fear turned into determination. If someone wanted to scare me into silence, they'd picked the wrong woman. Daniel had transferred $5 million to a hidden account just weeks before his death. That hidden account felt like Daniel's final message to me, and I needed to know why. Mr. Fletcher called me into his office the next morning, his tone serious but cautious. When I arrived, he had several folders spread out on his desk, filled with printouts of transactions and legal documents. "Margaret," he began, "I've been working with our investigator. Daniel opened that account 6 weeks before his death. It's registered under your name, not Vanessa's." My breath caught in my throat. "Mine?" I whispered. He nodded. "Yes." He set it up quietly, using a secondary attorney and encrypted communications. The records show he deposited $5 million and never touched it again. "It's legally yours now." I stared at the papers in disbelief. My son had created a secret account for me, but why keep it hidden from everyone, even his own wife? "I think Daniel was planning something," Mr. Fletcher continued. "He may have suspected trouble. This account wasn't part of his main estate, which means Vanessa didn't know it existed." I leaned back in the chair, my heart pounding. My son had been protecting me from something. From her. After leaving the office, I couldn't shake the memory of our last conversation. He'd sounded worried, distracted. When I asked if Vanessa was okay, he just said, "She's different lately. Don't worry about it, Mom." I remembered how his voice cracked on that last part. Now, it all made sense. He was worried. Determined to learn more, I asked Mr. Fletcher to trace the account's origin. A few days later, he called with news. The account was created through Daniel's company using an internal system he built himself. We also found encrypted emails between Daniel and his corporate lawyer. I met with the investigator, a man named Carter. He was quiet, sharp, and didn't mince words. "Daniel knew something was wrong," he told me. "The emails suggest he was about to restructure his company shares and restrict Vanessa's control. He suspected financial ground, misconduct, possibly embezzlement." The words hit me like a wave. "So Vanessa was stealing from him?" Carter nodded. "That's what it looks like. He was preparing to confront her, but he never got the chance." My heart sank. My son's death wasn't just a tragedy, it might have been the result of betrayal. That night, I sat in Daniel's old study again, holding one of the few surviving photos the intruder hadn't destroyed. His face looked so peaceful, so alive, it hurt to look at it. I whispered, "You knew, didn't you, sweetheart? You knew she was lying." The next morning, I met with Carter again. He had pulled more data from Daniel's work server's backups Vanessa didn't know existed. Among them were drafts of emails Daniel never sent. In one, dated 2 days before his death, he wrote, "If anything happens to me, Mom should know the truth. She'll know what to do." I felt the room spin as I read those words. He knew something might happen to him. Carter placed a hand on my shoulder. "Margaret, I think Daniel's accident wasn't just an accident. The brake line in his car was tampered with. We're waiting on the official report, but there's enough to open an inquiry." My pulse raced. Images of that night flooded back: the call, the sterile hospital room, Vanessa's dry eyes at the funeral. It all started to fit together in a horrifying puzzle. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Carter's gaze was steady. "Now, we dig deeper. If Vanessa had anything to do with Daniel's death, we'll find proof." I nodded, my fear turning into cold resolve. "Do whatever it takes," I told him. "I want the truth, no matter how painful it is." The investigator says, I think your son's death wasn't an accident. Those words froze. My heart. Had my daughter-in-law played a part in Daniel's death? The thought alone made my stomach turn. I wanted to believe Daniel's accident was just a tragic twist of fate. But the pieces were coming together too neatly, too deliberately. Carter showed me photos from the scene, copies of the police report, and his own analysis. Look here, he said, pointing at the image of Daniel's car. The damage pattern doesn't match a simple brake failure. There are tool marks near the brake line. Someone tampered with it. I covered my mouth, trying to steady my breathing. So, it wasn't mechanical failure? No, Carter said grimly. It was deliberate. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. And you think Vanessa? She's the most likely suspect, he said. Daniel discovered her embezzling money from the company. If he confronted her, she had motive to silence him. I sat in silence for a long moment, trying to absorb what he'd just said. My son had trusted that woman, he'd loved her, and she might have taken his life. Carter promised to take his findings to the police. I expected them to dismiss it, but, to my surprise, Detective Harris, a veteran investigator, took the case seriously. If this evidence holds, he told me, we can reopen the file. The days that followed were a blur of interviews and meetings. I gave my statement, explaining everything: the will reading, the threats, the break-in, and the mysterious messages. Harris listened carefully, occasionally taking notes. If she's trying to intimidate you, it means she's scared, he said. And scared people make mistakes. While the investigation moved forward, I struggled to keep myself together. Nights were the worst. Every shadow felt like a presence. Every car that passed outside made me tense. Nora stayed over a few nights, refusing to let me be alone. You've been through too much, Margaret, she said gently. Daniel would want you safe, but safe wasn't enough anymore. I wanted justice. A week later, Carter came by with new evidence: Vanessa's sudden spike in wealth. She's been moving money, he said, showing me bank statements. Luxury purchases, new investments, even a payment to a mechanic who worked on Daniel's car 2 weeks before his death. I felt the blood drain from my face. That can't be a coincidence. It's not, Carter said. We're subpoenaing his financial records. The mechanic's name came up in other shady jobs before. If he talks, we'll have her. Meanwhile, Vanessa maintained her act online, still playing the grieving widow, posting photos of Daniel with captions like, "Gone too soon, my love." The hypocrisy made me sick. Beneath every word, I could almost hear her mocking laughter. Detective Harris called me in for a follow-up meeting. We found a deleted voicemail on Daniel's phone, he said. It was recovered from cloud storage. I swallowed hard. What does it say? He pressed play on a small recorder. Daniel's voice filled the room, shaky, frightened, but unmistakably his. Mom, if you get this, something's wrong. Vanessa found out about the account. She's furious. I'll talk to her tonight and straighten it out, but if anything happens... The message cut off suddenly with a sharp sound, like a door slamming. Tears streamed down my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. He knew, I whispered. He was scared. Harris nodded solemnly. We'll use this. Combined with the financial trail, it's strong evidence of motive and intent. As I left the station, the wind felt colder, sharper. I clutched my coat tighter around me. Vanessa thought she'd silenced Daniel forever, but she hadn't counted on me. I would make sure his voice was heard, no matter what it took. The detective finds a deleted voice message from Daniel the night before he died. Hearing my son's voice again broke me, but what he said shattered me completely. Detective Harris handed me a small flash drive. You might want to listen to this privately, he said. It's the unedited version of the voicemail. I thanked him, though my hands trembled as I slipped it into my purse. That night, I sat in my quiet living room, the air heavy with anticipation. I plugged the drive into my laptop and pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the room. Warm, but strained. Mom, I know you're worried about me, but I'll be okay. I found something in the company accounts transfers Vanessa made behind my back. I've already moved what's left into your name for safekeeping. If anything happens, look in my office safe. The folder inside explains everything. I love you. The message ended there. My breath caught in my throat, and I buried my face in my hands, sobbing. My sweet boy, even in his final days, he'd been trying to protect me. The next morning, I called Carter. "We need to find that folder," I told him. Within hours, he arranged for us to visit Daniel's old office. Walking through those glass doors was like stepping into a memory, his laughter echoing faintly in the halls, his favorite coffee mug still sitting on a shelf. Carter moved methodically, searching the drawers and cabinets. "He mentioned a safe," he said. "Where would he have hidden it?" I looked around, scanning the walls, the furniture, the photos. Then I noticed a slight gap behind one of his framed certificates. When Carter removed it, there was a small panel behind it. Inside sat a digital safe, coated in dust. My pulse quickened. "Do you know the code?" Carter asked. I thought for a moment, then typed in Daniel's birthday. The safe clicked open. Inside was a thick folder labeled, "For Mom." I felt my knees weaken. Inside were printed emails, bank statements, and legal drafts. Carter flipped through them with widening eyes. "This is huge," he said. "She transferred over $3 million from company funds into personal accounts. And here, look at this email," he confronted her about it. He handed me a printed message. It read, "Vanessa, I know what you've done. We need to talk before I go to the board. I can't let this go on. Daniel." The date on the email was the night before the crash. I felt dizzy. He was going to expose her. Carter nodded grimly. And she couldn't let that happen. We turned the evidence over to Detective Harris. Within days, the police reopened Daniel's case as a possible homicide. Vanessa, of course, denied everything. Her lawyer claimed Daniel's death was a tragic accident and accused me of inventing conspiracies for money. But the evidence spoke louder than her words. The story began to spread whispers through Daniel's old company, murmurs among friends who once envied Vanessa's wealth. The woman who once strutted around town in designer heels was now being watched by detectives. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was exhaustion. Grief mixed with anger and disbelief. How could someone who shared our family table, who called me Mom, be capable of this? That night, I sat by the window, unable to sleep. I stared at the empty driveway, remembering the black SUV that once lingered there. I'd hoped those nights were behind me, but fear has a way of returning when you least expect it. At 3:12 a.m., I was jolted awake by a loud boom. The smell of smoke hit me next. I ran to the window and screamed. My car was engulfed in flames. Fire roared, orange against the night, as neighbors rushed outside. The firefighters said it was arson. I didn't need to ask who did it. I already knew. That night, Margaret's car is set on fire outside her home. Flames lit up the night sky as my past and present burned before my eyes. The fire roared so fiercely that it seemed to swallow sound itself. I stood barefoot on the lawn, my nightgown whipping in the wind, staring at what was once my car. The firefighters worked fast, but by the time they put it out, there was nothing left but twisted metal and smoke. My neighbors whispered among themselves, pity and fear written all over their faces. Detective Harris arrived before dawn, his expression grim. "We'll classify this as arson," he said, kicking lightly at the charred debris. Someone poured accelerant around the tires. They wanted to send a message, not just destroy property. My throat felt dry. "You think, Vanessa?" He gave me a knowing look. "It fits the pattern. Threats, stalking, intimidation. She's escalating. We'll assign an officer to patrol the area until we can make an arrest." They taped off the scene, took photos, and collected what was left of a melted gas can found nearby. I watched them from the porch, the smell of gasoline still thick in the air. Grief had turned to fury. I'd lost my son, and now she wanted to strip away my peace too. That morning, I called Mr. Fletcher and told him everything. He didn't hesitate. "I'll increase your security detail," he said. "Carter's team can install motion sensors and cameras with live alerts. You're not alone in this, Margaret." Nora stayed with me for a few days afterward. She made coffee, tried to get me to rest, but I couldn't. I kept replaying the moment I saw the flames, wondering if Vanessa had been watching from somewhere nearby. 2 days later, Carter came by with new evidence. He'd tracked one of the payments Vanessa made to a man named Rick Donovan, a mechanic. Carter's team found records linking him to multiple insurance scams and falsified car repairs. "We confronted him," Carter said, setting a recorder on the table. He admitted Vanessa paid him to adjust Daniel's brakes. Said she told him it was just to teach him a lesson. My heart dropped. "A lesson?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "She killed him." Carter nodded solemnly. We turned his confession over to Detective Harris. With this, the DA can move forward with charges. That night, I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the soft glow of the security monitor. Every sound outside made me flinch, every shadow made my pulse race. I wasn't sure what scared me more, that Vanessa might come after me again, or that justice might still slip away. The next morning, the police obtained a warrant for Vanessa's arrest. When they went to her home, she was gone. Lucas wasn't there either. Harris called me personally. "She fled with the boy," he said. "We've issued a nationwide alert." Hearing that shattered me all over again. "She took Lucas?" I whispered. "Yes," he said gently. "We'll find them. I promise." Days turned into weeks. My house became a fortress of silence. Every time the phone rang, my heart leapt. News stations began covering the story, "Widow of Tech CEO under investigation for fraud and murder." The headlines were surreal. My family's pain was now public. 2 weeks later, the call came. Harris's voice was different this time, lighter. "We've got her," he said. "She tried to board a flight out of the country with a fake passport. She had over $2 million in cash." I closed my eyes and let out a trembling breath. Relief washed over me, mixed with heartbreak. Lucas was safe, but his childhood, his innocence was gone forever. They brought Vanessa back in handcuffs, cameras flashing as she was led through the airport. Her face was cold, emotionless, as if she still believed she could win. I watched the footage on TV and felt a strange mix of sorrow and triumph. Daniel's killer was finally facing justice. But deep down, I knew the real fight had just begun. 2 weeks later, Vanessa is caught at an airport with a fake passport and $2 million in cash. When they handcuffed Vanessa, she still smiled like she knew something I didn't. The news footage looped endlessly on television. Vanessa Brooks, the once polished widow, being escorted through the airport terminal in shackles. She wore sunglasses despite the flashing cameras, her chin lifted high as if she were walking a red carpet instead of toward prison. I watched in silence, clutching my coffee cup, feeling a mix of relief and disgust. Even caught, she looked proud, unrepentant. Detective Harris called later that morning. "We've got her in custody," he said. "She's being charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder." The mechanic's statement sealed it. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank God." Harris's tone softened. "There's one more thing. Lucas is safe. He was with her during the arrest. We've contacted Child Protective Services, but considering the circumstances, the court is likely to place him with his closest family." My heart skipped. "You mean me?" "That's right," Harris said. "You're his legal guardian now, at least temporarily, until the trial concludes." Tears welled up as I thanked him. I hadn't seen Lucas in months. When he was finally brought to my home by a kind social worker, my heart nearly burst. He looked so much like Daniel, those same hazel eyes, that shy smile. But there was a new sadness there, something far too heavy for an 8-year-old to carry. "Grandma?" he asked softly when he saw me. I knelt down, my arms open. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, pulling him close. "You're safe now. I promise, you're safe." He held onto me tightly, his small hands gripping my sweater like he never wanted to let go. That night, I tucked him into the guest room, and for the first time in a long time, my house felt alive again, fragile, but alive. The following weeks blurred into meetings with lawyers, child advocates, and detectives. The trial date was set, and I was subpoenaed to testify. The thought of facing Vanessa again made my stomach twist, but I owed Daniel that much. On the first day of court, the room buzzed with reporters and murmurs. Vanessa entered in a gray prison uniform, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. When her eyes met mine, there wasn't anger this time, just coldness, like I was nothing to her. Mr. Fletcher sat beside me, whispering reassurance as the prosecution presented their case. They showed the financial records, the mechanic's testimony, and the recovered voicemail from Daniel. Each piece painted the same horrifying picture: a woman driven by greed and jealousy, willing to do anything to protect her lies. When it was my turn to testify, I stood before the court and told them everything: how she'd isolated me from my son. The threats, the messages, the night of the fire. My voice shook, but I didn't look away from her. She destroyed everything good in Daniel's life, I said quietly. But she won't destroy what's left of his memory. The courtroom was silent when I stepped down. Even Vanessa's lawyer seemed deflated. After 2 long weeks, the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she didn't cry. Instead, she turned to the judge and asked, "May I speak with Mrs. Brooks privately?" The courtroom gasped. The judge hesitated, then granted a supervised meeting before sentencing. Mr. Fletcher warned me not to go, but something deep inside me said I needed to hear whatever venom she still had left. As the guards led her away, she glanced back at me and smirked the same cruel smile I'd seen the day of the will reading. Vanessa is found guilty on all counts, but then demands to speak privately with Margaret. I didn't know why I agreed to meet her. Maybe I needed to hear it from her own lips. The courthouse had a small visitation room, just 4 walls, a metal table, and 2 chairs bolted to the floor. When the guard escorted me in, Vanessa was already sitting there, her wrists cuffed, a faint smile curving her lips. Despite the orange jumpsuit and the dull fluorescent light that drained color from everything, she still held herself like she was in control. I sat across from her, my palms flat on the cold metal table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The guard stood by the door, arms crossed, eyes locked on us. Finally, Vanessa broke the silence. "You look tired, Margaret," she said, tilting her head slightly. "This whole ordeal must have been exhausting." I kept my gaze steady. "You murdered my son," I said evenly. "You have no right to speak his name." Her smile faltered just a little. "Oh, please, don't act like you know everything. Daniel and I had problems, sure. But what couple doesn't?" "Problems?" I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "You stole from him, you lied, you tried to ruin me." Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You ruined yourself the moment you couldn't stand seeing him happy without you. You always hated me, didn't you? You made him question me, turn against me." "That's not true," I said quietly. "I loved him enough to stay out of your way. You were the one who poisoned everything." Her expression darkened. "You think you've won because I'm sitting here in chains? You think your little victory in court changes anything? Lucas will grow up hating you, just like Daniel started to." I felt my heart lurch, but I didn't let her see it. "Lucas will grow up knowing the truth," I said firmly. "He'll know what his father stood for and what his mother destroyed." For a second, something flickered in her eyes, regret, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She sat back, crossing her arms. "Daniel was weak," she said coldly. "He never knew how to handle success. He wanted to take everything from me, so I made sure he couldn't." The words hit me like a blow. My throat tightened, and I had to grip the edge of the table to keep steady. "You killed him over money," I whispered. "No," she said, smirking. "Again, I killed him because he underestimated me." The guard stepped forward, his voice sharp. "That's enough." Vanessa ignored him, her gaze locked on me. "You think you've destroyed me, but I'm not done. I'll appeal. I'll fight. And when Lucas is old enough, I'll tell him everything: how his precious grandmother lied and twisted the truth to steal what was mine." I stood, my hands shaking. "The only liar in this story is you, Vanessa. And your punishment isn't the prison walls, it's knowing that the one person you claim to love will grow up despising you." Her jaw clenched, but I could see something crack beneath her defiance. For the first time, she looked small, a cornered animal, realizing the cage was real. I turned to leave, my chest tight but steady. As the guard opened the door, Vanessa screamed after me, her voice echoing down the hallway. "You'll regret this, Margaret. You hear me? You'll regret this." I didn't look back. I walked straight past the rows of empty benches, past the stares of strangers, and out into the cold air. I breathed in deeply, the wind sharp against my face. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, not happy, not yet, but free. As Margaret walks away, Vanessa screams, "You'll regret this." For the first time in months, I felt peace knowing the truth had finally surfaced. Vanessa was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of early release. The courtroom had been silent when the judge delivered the sentence, except for the faint clinking of Vanessa's handcuffs as she was led away. I didn't feel joy or triumph, just an overwhelming sense of release. Justice, long overdue, had finally been served. Afterward, the world seemed to slow down. The reporters lost interest, the investigators stopped calling, and the quiet returned. But it wasn't the same quiet that once haunted me. This one felt earned, like a deep breath after a storm. Lucas and I began settling into a new rhythm. The first morning after the trial, I made pancakes, and he smiled a small, genuine smile that melted me completely. He asked about his dad sometimes, and I answered honestly but gently. I told him Daniel was brave, kind, and full of love. I didn't mention the ugliness of his mother's actions, not yet. Someday, he'd need to know the full story, but not while he still had that childlike spark in his eyes. He deserved a few more years of innocence. We moved to a smaller home closer to his school, a cozy cottage on a quiet street lined with oak trees. The walls smelled of fresh paint, and sunlight streamed through every window. I hung Daniel's photo above the fireplace, not as a reminder of tragedy, but of strength. Every time I looked at it, I whispered, "We're okay now, my love." Mr. Fletcher visited a week after the sentencing with the final paperwork. "Everything's officially settled," he said, laying out the documents for me to sign. "Your trust and Lucas's are secure. You can finally move forward." I nodded, signing each page carefully. "I don't care about the money," I told him. "I just want Lucas to have the future Daniel wanted for him." Mr. Fletcher smiled softly. "And that's exactly why Daniel trusted you." With a portion of the funds, I set up a scholarship in Daniel's name, the Brooks Foundation for Innovation, to help underprivileged students pursue technology and science. It felt right, like carrying his dreams forward. When the first group of students received their scholarships, I attended the ceremony quietly from the back row, tears glistening in my eyes. Daniel's name was spoken with respect and gratitude. It was as if a piece of him lived on through every one of them. As months passed, Lucas began to flourish. He made friends, started soccer, and laughed more often. At night, we'd sit on the porch, watching fireflies light up the yard. He once asked, "Grandma, do you think Dad can see us?" I smiled softly. "I think he never stopped watching over us, sweetheart." Those moments healed me more than I could ever explain. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was peaceful. The nightmares faded, replaced by quiet mornings, laughter, and the sound of a child's footsteps filling my home again. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I was sorting through mail, I saw an envelope with no return address. My hands went cold. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, deliberate. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "You think you've won, but the story isn't over. People like me don't disappear that easily. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts." I felt my pulse quicken. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. The prison stamp on the envelope said enough. I folded the letter, my hands trembling slightly. Part of me wanted to call the police, but another part of me knew that this was just her last attempt to hold on to power she no longer had. I burned the letter in the fireplace and watched it curl into ash. But then a letter arrives from Vanessa. I hesitated before opening the envelope, half afraid of what venom Vanessa had left inside. It had been nearly 6 months since the sentencing, and I'd started to believe life had finally steadied. Lucas was thriving, he'd made friends, joined his school's robotics club, and even brought home a drawing of our family, me, him, and a bright sun hovering above us. It was the kind of innocent happiness I hadn't seen in so long. But the moment I saw that letter, all that peace trembled. The paper inside smelled faintly of disinfectant, the sterile scent of prison. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, neat, deliberate. As I unfolded it, my stomach knotted. "Congratulations, Margaret," it began. "You've turned my son against me. You've taken everything I built and wrapped yourself in it, like a queen in stolen silk. Enjoy it while you can, because when I'm free, I'll remind Lucas who his real mother is." I read the words slowly, each one like a drop of poison. She hadn't changed. Even behind bars, Vanessa still believed she was the victim, still clinging to her delusions of control. The next paragraph was worse. "You think the world believes your little story? Don't fool yourself. People remember what I gave Daniel. The company, the image, the success. It was all me. Without me, he was nothing. And you would still be living in that rundown house you called a home. You should thank me." My hands shook, my vision blurred with anger. I'd faced her lies in court, but reading them here, in my own home, made my blood boil. Yet beneath the fury, I felt something else: pity. Vanessa was locked in her own prison long before a judge sentenced her. She ended the letter with one last line that made my heart drop. "When Lucas grows up, he'll come looking for me. And when he does, I'll tell him everything." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I folded the letter carefully and stared at it, feeling the weight of every word. The woman who'd taken my son, nearly destroyed my life, and burned my peace still wanted to reach from her cell and wound me again. That night, I sat by the fireplace long after Lucas went to bed, staring into the flames. The crackling wood reminded me of the fire that had once consumed my car, the same fire that used to live inside Vanessa. But this time, the fire was mine to control. I tossed the letter into the flames. The paper curled, blackened, and disappeared. I didn't look away until every trace of her words had turned to ash. Lucas came downstairs just as I was stirring the embers. "Grandma, what are you doing?" he asked sleepily. I smiled softly, brushing ash from my fingers. "Just getting rid of something old, sweetheart." He climbed into my lap, curling up against me. "Was it something bad?" I thought about it for a moment. "It was something that didn't deserve to stay," I said quietly. "Sometimes, letting go is the only way to stay free." He nodded, his little head resting on my shoulder. "Dad used to say that when you let go of bad things, good ones can find you." Tears stung my eyes. "He was right," I whispered. We sat there together, the glow of the fire soft against our faces. I realized then that peace wasn't something you found, it was something you chose, even after the worst storms. As I tucked Lucas back into bed that night, I felt the weight of the past finally lifting. Vanessa could write all the letters she wanted. She could spin her lies until her dying breath. But she couldn't reach us anymore, not where love lived. I kissed Lucas's forehead and turned off the light. My heart was steady, my mind quiet. But just as she starts to heal, she receives a call from Mr. Fletcher saying there's one more thing Daniel left behind. I never imagined Daniel's final surprise would bring me to tears all over again. The phone rang early that morning. Mr. Fletcher's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Margaret, there's something you should see. It's about Daniel. Can you come by the office today?" My heart quickened. After everything that had happened, the trial, the threats, the letter, hearing his name like that stirred both hope and fear inside me. When I arrived, Mr. Fletcher was waiting in the conference room. On the table sat a small flash drive and a sealed envelope with my name written in Daniel's handwriting. My breath caught at the sight of those familiar loops and curves. For a long moment I just stared at it, unable to move. "I found this while organizing the remaining estate documents," Mr. Fletcher said softly. "Daniel recorded a message for you a few weeks before he passed. I thought you might want to see it in private. But if you'd like, I can stay." I shook my head. "No, I need to hear his voice alone." He nodded and left, closing the door behind him. My hands trembled as I plugged the flash drive into the computer. The screen flickered for a moment, then there he was, Daniel. My son. Alive again through the pixels, smiling that same boyish smile I'd missed so much. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice warm and steady. "If you're watching this, it means things didn't go the way I hoped." He chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he was nervous. "I know you're probably crying right now, but please don't be sad. I just wanted you to know that I love you. Always have, always will." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I leaned closer to the screen. "I've made a lot of mistakes," he continued. "I let success get between us. I let people come between us. I should have protected you from Vanessa sooner, but I thought I could fix everything myself." He paused, his eyes glistening. "If something happens to me, promise me you'll live. Don't let her take that from you. Raise Lucas to be kind, strong, and honest. Make sure he knows who I really was and who you are." He smiled again, his voice softening. "You were my greatest teacher, Mom. You showed me what it means to love without conditions. I didn't say it enough, but you were my hero." I covered my mouth, trying to hold back sobs. I wanted to reach through the screen, to hug him one last time, to tell him I forgave him for everything, for the distance, for trusting the wrong person, for leaving me too soon. Daniel took a deep breath. "By now, you've probably found the trust I set up for you and Lucas. That was my way of making sure you'd be okay. I wanted you to have security, but more than that, I wanted you to have peace. Don't let the past keep you from it." He smiled one last time. "You were my greatest gift, Mom. Always." The screen went black. I sat there in silence, sobbing quietly into my hands. The ache in my chest was heavy, but for the first time, it wasn't just pain, it was gratitude. My son had spoken to me from beyond the grave, not with bitterness or fear, but with love, pure, enduring love. When I finally stepped outside, the sunlight was golden, soft against my face. The breeze carried the faint scent of lilacs, Daniel's favorite flower. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Rest easy, my son. Justice is done." Back home, Lucas was waiting for me on the porch, holding a small bouquet of daisies. "For you, Grandma," he said shyly. I knelt down, taking them with a trembling smile. "Thank you, sweetheart. They're beautiful." As we stood there, the world felt quiet, whole again. The pain hadn't vanished, but it no longer owned me. It was simply part of my story, one that ended with love instead of hate. And for the first time in years, I whispered to the heavens, "Rest easy, my son. Justice is done."